Yes, welcome into the camp. We're back for day 2 of fall camp, or I should say we are done with day 2 of fall camp. Badgers were down in Platteville for a couple hours this morning. It's starting to get warmer, Jesse. Tuesday was warm. Wednesday was warmer. It feels like it's going to continue to get warmer and warmer. Luckily, for the most part, we're up in a box with air conditioning, but that post-game or that post-practice session with the coaches and players, it's very, very tough.
Well, it's worse for them, but
I'm
yeah.
just messing with you. No, I know. I'm joking, of course, but that is a little bit of a thing, and they get them in their ice baths right after practice, and I know that has very little to do with the heat. It's obviously just trying to get their bodies, that after treatments so they can rebound and be good to go for the next day. But it didn't look like a bad thing today. You know what I mean? Like that ice bath, it didn't look like a horrible thing that you would have to go jumping into after practice. I don't know how many guys were actually against doing that after today, because it is warm, and it's even warmer down in the field with the turf. And yeah, either way, it's July / almost August. It's going to be warm, obviously, but the day was a much better one, or I should say a better one for the offense than it was on day one, for sure. We didn't see any turnovers, right?
Right.
No turnovers. There were some big plays in the run game. There were some splash plays from some of the younger guys. It was a better day, and we heard from offensive line coach AJ Blazik afterwards, and he admitted as much, right? Like the change in what the on offense was much different from Tuesday to Wednesday.
Yeah, I think he could obviously only specifically speak to the offensive line and what he saw, but he felt like the practice on Tuesday did not meet the standard that he expects. And certainly based on our conversation with Luke Fickell after that practice, he felt the same, but much better today. And I think this is obviously it's a process. Day one, just like spring training in baseball, you don't expect to be at your best right away. And so the goal is to amp up to get to a point where when you get to August 30th and you're in Camp Randall on that Friday night, you look like a team that's ready to be pretty good this season. So, we talked yesterday. They had 6 turnovers unofficially, all fumbles, and that's certainly unacceptable. So this was a good step forward, and nice to see some of those players start to emerge.
So, again, as we did yesterday, posted some video from practice up there, and I know that he is not at the top of the depth chart. I know he is not a starter. I know that who knows what exactly his role will be. But in looking at standouts from today, it's impossible for me not just to go straight to Darrion Dupree, because one-on-ones, they do these one-on-one competition periods after their warm-ups. And yesterday it was wide receivers and defensive backs. Today it was the running backs and tight ends against safeties and linebackers. And they threw Darrion Dupree in there late. And initially he was expected to go against Landon Gauthier, right? Like he was in there. And Mike Tressel, defensive coordinator, linebackers coach, pulled Gauthier out, and threw Jaheim Thomas in there. Jaheim Thomas is a starting linebacker for Wisconsin. He is going to be one of their better players on defense. And I think they just wanted to give, maybe Darrion Dupree a welcome to college moment, right? Like maybe just this is actually what you're going to have to face on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, if we're being fair and the video's out there, it's not like we all didn't see it. He cooked him. He cooked. And I don't know if he's going to have that much time to make a move. Always, he set that move up very, very slowly, but he just made the move to the outside. And of all the guys that went today, by far the most separation of anybody. And I think he's just a special guy when catching the ball in the backfield. And I feel like somehow, some way, at some point this year, he's going to be involved.
So a few things off of that. First of all, it's worth pointing out to people who haven't had an opportunity to see these kinds of drills. The defensive player is at a significant disadvantage because it is a one-on-one. The guy's not even running an actual route. He's just trying to figure out a way to get open. He can go on either side of the field, and the linebacker has no help. Right. That's the caveat here. But yes, it was the most impressive play of one-on-ones. And I got to tell you, I felt this yesterday, and I know I talked about it a little bit, but Darrion is like the guy in this recruiting class that I compare most to Tresh Kekahuna in the put him on the field, get him the ball in space and clear out, because he just, it feels like, has that special quality. Not to say that there aren't other guys that don't, but for someone to come in those first couple of days and when you touch the ball, it raises eyebrows, I think is noteworthy. And that wasn't the only play. When they got into actual 11 on 11, he makes his mark there too. And yes, his opportunities are not coming against the starting defense, but there's a specific play that comes to mind that he caught a pass on the right side and knocked over a walk-on linebacker and lowered his shoulder and kind of gained some extra yardage against Justin Taylor, who's obviously a scholarship defensive back. And there's not a ton of opportunities, just like there weren't on the first day, but when he touches the ball, you notice it, and I think you feel it.
Yeah, when I wrote that play down in my notes, I said, just feels different with when him, and there was actually a moment for Dylan Jones as well. It just feels a little bit different when they have the ball in their hands than I'm not saying than Chez Mellusi or Tui Walker. It just feels a little bit different when they have the ball in their hands compared to some of the other younger guys that they're going against for sure. But yeah, he had a linebacker on skates, ran through Justin Taylor. He has a little bit of he has it to him for sure. And the obviously the Kekahuna difference is that Tresh was hurt last year and he didn't get to take part in fall camp, and he didn't actually, get onto the field till later in the year because of that injury, the foot injury, the broken foot. But I remember talking when we did Temple and Heilprin out at Monks, talking with Tanner Bordolini during the bye week, and we asked, some of the young guys like who are standing out, and he mentioned Tresh, and it just feels like when there's a play that Jones or that Dupree has the ball in his hands, it feels like we always get one of those whoo moments where everyone in the crowd is going whoo, and you heard that today when he made his move against Jakeem Thomas. You heard him when he made that move on that freshman linebacker, and anybody you talked to about, whether it was Jake Renfro today or Braden Locke back on media day, they all say the same thing, and they think he's special. And we'll see if we get to see a lot of that this year, or any of it this year. And there's different ways to get him involved in the offense. It doesn't have to be handing the ball to him in the backfield. You know what I mean? Like with him and his skill set, he can get the ball in a bunch of different ways. And they just have a number of guys like that you kind of feel that way about, whether it's Tresh, whether it's Will Pauling. There are certain guys just get the ball in their hands and let's see what they can do with it.
Dupree really thrived in a pass catching role in high school too. I mean, they obviously, your best player, you want to find different ways to get him the ball, but he was an absolute menace. And there's a reason that Lucas talked about Dylan Jones and Darrion Dupree as potential contributors at running back. Now, I should say we're obviously it's easy to point out the new guy. There are guys that have been around for a while who are still making plays, but you're just kind of used to it. It will take something monumental and unpredictable, in my mind, for Chez Mellusi and Tui Walker not to be the 1-2. Like, they are still doing a lot of work, and obviously Tui Walker had a very good day as well. The good news, if you're a Badgers fan, though, is there is a lot of talent in the running back room from top to bottom, and that's a really good thing.
It's a big change from last year, right? It's a big change from, and Luke Fickell kind of talked about this, is he felt they could deal with injuries in a number of places last year, but running back and quarterback were two places where he didn't think they could. And you lose, obviously, your quarterback. Well, I shouldn't say you lose Chez in game 4, then you lose your quarterback a couple of weeks later, and Braylon's all beat up. And so the two spots where you could not lose guys, you lost guys. And so, yeah, running back is in a better spot this year. Quarterback is in a better spot this year, with the way that certainly that you would think Braden Locke is, according to Phil Longo, 2 times the quarterback or twice the quarterback that he was last year. The other thing that I think stood out on Tuesday was we didn't see a lot from the quarterbacks. Wednesday, the offense was better. I know when we were talking up there in the press box, I don't know that there were a ton of wow throws. There probably weren't, but I will say this. Tyler Van Dyke just looks legitimately quicker and faster than he did in the spring. And I don't know. And we know when we talked to Brady, he mentioned that. But actually seeing it on the field and watching him pull the ball a couple times or get on the edge, he does. He looks legitimately faster and quicker.
And I would say, I would venture to guess almost every practice, there is at least one play where he ends up tucking the ball and getting a huge gain. And granted, some of that is, can't be touched.
Yeah.
But it feels legitimate in the moment. And that is part of what he can provide and why I think he'll be pretty good for this system. That's not his specialty, but he can do that. And so the arm strength is there. I think a lot of it with him comes down to confidence in himself. Yep. Just because look what happened. You go from being the ACC Rookie of the Year, a legitimate projected first-round NFL draft pick, to 2 seasons that completely underwhelmed, and you're ending up going to a new school with 1 year to try and show you can be the guy who you once were. And physically, it feels like he's got all the tools. You mentioned he does seem faster, and so I don't know if other people look at it this way. To me, it's his job to lose. I mean, that's why he came here with 1 year left. And so today was another good step in that direction.
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen anything through the first 2 days that says it's not his job, right? I mean, they're obviously still doing the share, but I think we both said on Monday going into this thing that barring something unforeseen, he is going to be the starting quarterback. That doesn't mean he's going to be a starter throughout the entire year. I mean, he got benched last year, and Braden Locke is not that far away from him. But when you talk about a competition, it definitely is a competition. They still are rotating. They're still getting time with the offense, with, one guy leading the first team offense, the other one leading the second team offense, and then switching back and forth. So they're both getting those opportunities. And then maybe Metzauer is running with the threes. They're going back and forth. I don't know that I don't know if there's been a change in the reps whatsoever. I think they're both getting equal time with the first team, and we'll see if that continues on. Again, this is early in camp where I don't know that they have the entire offense in, and that I think they're still in the process of installing stuff. And so we haven't seen a lot of shots down the field. We haven't seen a lot of attempts to throw the ball down the field that we saw later in spring. And that was kind of when when Tyler Van Dyke kind of took off, was when they did have the entire offense in exactly how they wanted it to go. And he obviously stepped it up. But again, he's got just the arm strength is just at a different level than what Braden has. And I'm not going out on a limb and saying that. That's what everyone who's watched practice and Phil Longo as well have said the exact same thing. But we mentioned the running game a little bit. What was it? What stood out for you? I know again, they're not tackling, but it felt like some of those holes, even with pads on, were there, and Tyree Walker was able to explode through them. Was it just kind of like a same exact thing we saw in the spring from him?
Yes, there's at least 2 runs that come to mind where the holes were big and Walker shot right through it and had first down plus. Again, hard to definitively say what the outcome would be, but that's what he did in the spring. He is so much faster than what his on paper numbers, height and weight say. I mean, you think, oh, guy that big from a weight perspective is not going to have that type of speed, but he's got significant burst. And that's part of why I think the 1-2 combination feels like it's pretty well locked down. We know what Ches has been about, assuming he can stay healthy. And it's a 1-2 combo that provides some different skill sets. So Walker just continues to do his thing. And as long as those guys can stay healthy, I feel like Wisconsin's in a good spot. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, when you were talking about the quarterbacks, and I don't know if you recall this, but when we were down in Indianapolis, I think Luke was asked a question during our beat reporter session with him about Tyler Van Dyke. And if I'm remembering correctly, he said something to the effect of maybe Braden will essentially like maybe he'll light it up and Tyler will take a step back. Yeah. And in thinking about that now, it kind of makes me ponder what everyone realizes really of where we are at going into camp, that it feels like it's Tyler's job. But in the event that Tyler doesn't live up to what the expectations are and Braden is absolutely lights out, then something could change. So that's where it feels like it's at. But you're
Yep.
right. They're in a better spot from a quarterback perspective.
Well, I mean, just go back to our conversation with Ches during the, earlier in the summer. I mean, and talking to him and like what exactly they were capable of, and then going to Squat Fest and talking to Ty Wee after that, and him talking about how much they could use Tyler in the run game and a guy that big running that fast, and some of the things that we had heard from Brady. So, yeah, it feels like from a player's perspective, it's kind of the same way, but things are still progressing, and we'll see how the rest of this plays out. As I mentioned, Ches, do you think he's all the way back to where he was last year? Does he look like he did last year?
This is tough. I don't feel like through 2 practices there have been as many wow moments, like what we're talking about with Darrion, in part because we just had never seen him, so anything is amazing, it feels like.
Yes, and let's be fair. We do get crushes on this show.
Yeah, gotta have a man crush. I mean, what good
Yeah,
is a season if you don't have
we,
one?
we do have man crushes.
But sometimes we win those and sometimes we lose, by the way. We don't need to repeat who the previous man crushes have been, but win some, lose some.
I think there's a lot of people that are hoping we hit very hard on this one as opposed to the last few that we've had.
Yeah. But I think, what did Ches say in the spring? That he was like
75.
I mean, yeah, he was getting closer and closer. I think so. It's just that we haven't necessarily seen the huge breakout plays early in camp. But part of it to me is like I feel like they know what they have in him to some extent. And the goal with him is just get him healthy to the season opener and hope that he can be durable enough, whether it's luck or anything else, to make it through an entire season. But at that point, and even now, that injury was week 4 against Purdue. So that would have put it, 10 months ago, 11 months ago, something like
October.
that.
Yeah, it was early October.
Yeah. So,
or late September.
Now it was a very serious injury, obviously. I mean, it was, it was multiple issues going on there that he said it essentially required a reconstruction of the ankle. So, I mean, that's no small thing. But we'll have a chance to ask him on running back day at some point here in fall camp.
We will. The only reason I question is just because what he brought to the offense last year was that explosiveness that maybe they didn't necessarily have with Braylon. And I don't know that when he was coming off that ACL, and I guess there were a couple runs at fall camp that really jumped out, and he still got obviously a ways to go here. But yeah, I guess that's just one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on, is whether he is back to that explosiveness that he showed against Buffalo last year with that long run where he was doing the whole weaving thing and just go back and forth. I'm wondering if he's got that in his game right now. It might be a good question for him, and I'm sure he's going to say yes, because that's just what running backs, they're confident and they believe in themselves, and he's had a hell of a road back, and I'm hopeful for him that he can be there and be that guy for them, because he kind of deserves it after everything he's been through, the fight that he's put up. So you mentioned when running back talk day. Today was offensive line talk day, and we got to talk to, I know you're going to be writing a story about it, but Rabach, the new assistant offensive line coach, got to talk to him with about 5 minutes. Also got to talk to AJ Blazek, as I mentioned before, a couple of the guys. What kind of impact does Casey Rabach have on this staff, or on this offensive line, do you think? How big of an impact can he have?
Well, I think he can have as big of an impact as any assistant position coach can have. Again, it's AJ Blazek was hired to be the offensive line coach, but Casey is going to provide a lot of different stuff. I thought it was notable that Casey's essentially going to do a lot of what he did from a recruiting standpoint, because he's very good at evaluating prospects. Look at what they've been able to do in the last couple of recruiting classes, where he has been intimately involved in breaking down film and figuring out, well, who should we hire, or who should we, I guess in some capacity it is hire with NIL, but who should we recruit, both O-line and D-line. So he's going to continue in that. And then he's going to focus obviously on the field and working with these players, in particular, the guys on the interior, which makes sense because he was an interior lineman. But AJ said essentially that's like it's a tag team, kind of compared it to wrestling a little bit. And so maybe one day one guy's looking at the left side, one guy's looking at the right side, but it feels like it's a very collaborative effort. And you can't deny the career that he had. I mean, Joe Brunner was talking about, obviously, Joe knows as being an in-state guy, even if he wasn't around when Casey was playing for the Badgers, like that is the standard that needs to be upheld when you think of what Wisconsin offensive line play is all about. So he commands credibility, and then he had a decade plus NFL career. And so he can give them, specific pointers on the field, but also, as Casey was talking about, hey, I've been in your shoes. I was a freshman in camp. I was a fifth-year senior. This is my experience. These are the issues that I had. If you have a similar issue, hey, here's how I work through it. So I really think his role will be pretty significant in terms of how he can help these guys.
And it's obviously, you talk about the recruiting aspect of it, but this is a bigger commitment for him because he's not able to go where he wants to go on the weekends anymore, right? Like he's going to be traveling with these guys. And it's not like he wasn't there on game days around Wisconsin on game days, but going on the road and being with the team on the road is a bigger commitment for a guy who has a family and has, other responsibilities away from field, as most of us, as everyone does. It's not just job, which that's kind of what we think of. But in terms of like time-wise, it's such a commitment to not just do the recruiting aspect of it, which is a huge part of it because he's also involved in those visits when kids come to campus and that type of stuff. So I think and he talked about it. His family was actually kind of ones that pushed him a little bit to go ahead and do it because he's got the coaching itch. And he wants to be out on the field. He wants to be with those guys. He wants to be involved. And it's not like he wasn't around at all. He was. But when it became something that the NCAA was going to sign off on, and it's clear now, and this is the way it was going, he just makes too much sense for it. I don't know if you remember when Luke Fickell first got hired, and we were wondering because Bob Bostad was like, he took his box of stuff in his office and went home like the day that they hired Luke Fickell. I want to say that it was very, very quick. And we're all wondering like, who's going to coach the offensive line in the bowl game? And it was in Casey was like a very obvious choice of like, that makes sense. And so to see him back on the field and actually having a significant coaching role is I think very good for Wisconsin. And he's still, as you mentioned, going to be able to do that recruiting aspect of it as well. But we talk about where the Badgers, right? Like where that was all, it's always such a big thing. There needs to be a Badger on the staff, or there needs to be a Badger doing this, or like Casey's the quintessential Badger, like, through and through, from the state, played here, had a great NFL career, came back to live here, raise his family here, and now obviously coaching again.
Yeah, I talked to him back in the winter for a story when he was on the recruiting department side, but even then it was clear that he wanted down the road, not knowing necessarily when, to have a future in coaching. I go back to the story that he's told a few times now, didn't mention it today, but when he kind of got the coaching itch, because when he retired from the NFL, he said, I'm done. I did this my whole life. I don't want anything to do with it. And then his son started playing youth football, and initially the league wanted Casey to coach, and he said, no way. Well, he shows up to the first practice, and within minutes he's on the field coaching because he's like, I feel like I have something to offer and I can help these kids. And he never left the field. He ended up coaching that season, and that's kind of where we're at now in terms of, he talked about it. You have football in your blood, and once you play and once you're on the field, you kind of have that forever. So I think he'll be very good in this role. And you're right, his family encouraged him to have a place in Door County. He could make the drive. I think it was, what did he say? Something like 3.5 hours door to door. And part of what made it work was him being able to be around his family. But like he said, he's got a supportive wife and kids who encouraged him, and they're older. And so that probably helps as well. It's important to him to still be a dad, but yes, the time commitment of coaching is significant, but this is the role that I think he's always wanted. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. I had a great time in talking to him when I think it was spring ball, the first spring ball that whole staff was here, and just went through like learning different people and through on the camp here, and did an interview with him. And it was awesome. Not just because of like his role in recruiting and, his coaching and coming back to Wisconsin, is because he also blocked for Ron Dane. And I love talking to those guys because they have such great memories from those back-to-back Rose Bowl champion teams, and and obviously being a part of that whole record that he still holds. And just anytime you talk to any of those guys, and the same thing with Chris McIntosh last week at Media Days, they feel an ownership of what Ron Dayne did, and they're going to be celebrating it this fall. So he'll be able to not just coach, but also get celebrated because they're going to be celebrating that 25th anniversary, I guess, the 25th anniversary of Ron Dayne, but also celebrating those teams that won back-to-back championships in 98 and 99, the Rose Bowl, Big Ten and Rose Bowl champions. But yeah, it's, as I said, he's a perfect fit for Wisconsin. And you mentioned Joe Brunner. He is another guy that's a perfect fit for Wisconsin. He was talking about how he came on his visit, and the two people that hosted him were Tanner Bordolini, Wisconsin guy, and Jack Nelson, Wisconsin guy. And he's obviously from Brookfield. And when he came, he felt like he was part of the team right away. Now he's actually getting some playing time. He's going to be there. Like, are we safe to say he's going to be a starting left guard?
I would say that is very safe.
Okay. He is going through the same process that Jack Nelson did when he was younger. He is I don't want to say hothead's not.
He runs hot. He runs hot.
He runs hot.
His engine revs high.
That's what Blazek said, right? Yeah, he's got a little bit of a streak to him, and he is going to have fun when he's hitting guys in the head and blocking, and that's exactly what he loves to do. And I reminded him of the fight that he got into in the spring with Leon Lowry, and he goes, "Yeah, that was fun. I'll do a couple laps for that." And that's exactly what he had to do. He had to do a couple laps. And I said, yeah, that was a highlight for us as well. But he's got he's the one guy in this line that does not have a ton of playing experience. Jack Nelson's played a ton of ball. Riley Mahlman's played a ton of ball. Obviously Jake Renfro has played a ton, and certainly Joe Huber has played a ton in their different, in the different spots that they've played. He's the one guy, and yet I'm extremely excited to see what he's got. And I think, Blas talked about it. He's just a lot more detailed now than maybe he was at this time last year or the year before. He's locked in. And yes, he does have that motor that runs high, but I'm really, really excited to see what he's got, because I think we know he was obviously the top recruit in that class coming in, or one of the top recruits in that class, and the top ranked recruit for Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin that year, when a couple of those other guys went to different spots. Really excited to see what he's got for the Badgers this year.
He plays like a veteran who just hasn't had the opportunity to get actual game snaps. And AJ said this in the spring, that when you go back and look at it, Brunner was in a position where he probably should have earned more snaps last season. Now, obviously, that would mean it would come at the expense of some other guys, but he's here now. And even though the snaps that he's had in his career pale in comparison to the other four guys, he's every bit as talented, and I think people are going to have a chance to see that. But I was asking him today too about just the offensive line in general, and I said, I know you weren't a part of the regular playing rotation last season, but what's your perspective on where this group can be better when you compare it to last year? And he talked about playing with a lot more of that nastiness. Now, obviously the nasty, you've got to be effective in how you can be nasty, but no one's going to bring the nasty more than Brunner and Nelson. And so if you're trying to get through those two guys, good luck to you. Yeah,
that left side has a chance to be, I think, pretty special. And I think also at center, Jake Renfro's healthy. I mean, I'm not going to knock on wood or anything like that. That's not my thing. But just in terms of, I brought up the word injury to AJ Blasek when we talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, we don't talk about that. But he said he feels as good now than he ever has. And that, I think, says a lot, because if he's healthy, I think he could be extremely effective. And he certainly, in the bowl game I don't think he was all the way, I don't think he's coming off the bench, right? He's coming off the bench after barely playing all year and then kind of being thrown into the mix of a high level game. He more than held his own in that game for sure. But I think he's going to be even better as we get into the season this year, just because he's going to be playing on a week-to-week basis in actual games. And that has to be something that was probably pretty tough for him, just to be thrown into it at the end of last year.
He essentially missed 2 years of football. So to expect him to be the guy that he was when he was an all AAC performer in his first game back against LSU was asking a lot. And I think with the whole offseason to be healthy, you'll see a difference. I know a lot of people have made a lot of comparisons about maybe how the offense can function with the speed of Renfro's snaps. I mean, it's certainly, at least at this point, it's looked very smooth from that perspective, but you got to go and execute the play after that. And it remains to be seen whether Wisconsin can do that on a consistent enough basis given the schedule. But I think certainly with the top 5 offensive linemen, it's a very good group. The question comes down to, how do they build the depth necessary? And AJ even said right now they're looking for number 7 and number 8, because number 6, and he didn't say this, but we can say it, JP Benchwell, who I think established himself in the spring as that number 6 guy. The 7 and the 8 parts are where it gets really interesting. I think Barrett Nelson is going to be one of those guys, and AJ had a lot of praise for him, said that he kind of went out of his way to praise him and talked about the weight gain that he's had. He's over 300 for the first time in his career. I know when we looked at the rosters, he was up about 14 pounds. So I think he could be one, and we'll see about the rest of the guys. But he wants to have what AJ said, a pair and a spare. You want to have a couple swing guys. So they got to figure that out, because you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it feels unlikely that they're going to have the injury luck that they did last year along the offensive line. I mean, it more often than not does not happen. I'm not going to, again, you think about 22 was just how many mishmash of lineups did they have to throw out there throughout the season in 22. And then obviously last year, they didn't really have to do that at all. I mean, had Jake been healthy, I think, then you're able to put Tanner at one of the guard spots, right? Like maybe that's what you do. I don't know. We don't need to go back and relitigate it, but the fact is they have 5, 6, yes. And then Barrett Nelson hasn't played, but maybe you're starting to feel good about that. What's next after that is kind of the question, right? Because we thought going into this, it was going to be Leighton Nelson. They to transfer from Vanderbilt, but he's hurt right now. They do the thing where he's suited up and have him working off to the side during practice. But when we asked Blazek about that today, it wasn't like we're going to get him back type of stuff. And when we talked to Luke last week, it didn't seem like it. So they don't have that guy in on the interior, even a guy that could swing out and play tackle if you needed him to. So the next guys up are young guys, right? Whether it's Colin Cupperly or, right? I mean, obviously Kevin Haywood at left tackle, and he's still going to be he's there. But inside, I don't know that they have a ton of options after those top 3.
I know that the other guy AJ mentioned about potential depth pieces when he was praising guys. He talked about Barrett Nelson. He talked about the progress that James Durant had made.
Oh yeah,
in relation to where AJ felt like he ended the spring. And I mean, he was another really highly rated guy, a 4-star prospect. So maybe he can work his way into the mix. There's, as there has been for several years now, there's a lot of talent on paper within this offensive line group. The question is, can you show that talent on the field? Because the expectation here grew to be so high that anything less than that is, I won't say uncivilized, to quote Charles Barkley, but it's just, it fails to meet what people believe is possible. So they need 7 and potentially 8 because who knows where the injuries are going to come from, but that's what they're trying to figure out right now. And certainly a couple of those young guys are going to have an opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. I know we didn't really touch on the defense at all today. I thought, and maybe I know this happened yesterday, but Brandon Lane getting some reps with the second team defense. Do we think he's going to be a guy that is going to find his way into some first team reps? Again, they have Kurt Neal and they have James Thompson Jr. along with Ben Barton, but he's a guy that size-wise and experience-wise at least has done it. And I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but of the summer transfers that came in, him and Joseph Griffin, he feels like the guy that is going to be able to have an impact earlier than maybe Griffin.
I think so. And I also think Wisconsin needs it more at that position.
Oh, for sure.
Just because we've talked about the depth or lack thereof. So far, we've seen Neal, Thompson, Barton. Those have been the first team guys. And a lot of the twos have been the Brandon Lane, Cade McDonald combo. Yes, I think at some point you would think that we would see him in some capacity just so you can know what he can do. But you got to continue to prove it.
Yeah. And again, it's 6. They want 6, right? They want 6 guys that they can have in there. At least that's what Luke Fickell has said. They've got 3, and we'll see if a Brandon Lane or a Jamel Howard or a young Dylan Johnson or Will McDonald or whatever else is going to step up. But I think Brandon Lane certainly is going to be a part of that. Anything else on defense that stood out for you today?
Nothing too significant that we didn't touch on yesterday. I continue to be impressed with Thomas Heiberger and the opportunities that he gets. But a lot of the rotations were fairly similar, and they're just trying to work the pieces out. So
yeah,
fewer sacks maybe, but there were still some.
Fewer. I mean, there were definitely fewer sacks. There were definitely, as I said, no turnovers. The ball was not on the ground today. I imagine that was just a huge emphasis for in the wide receiver room yesterday with Kenny Guyton and company. So yeah, no, hell of a bounce back, I would say, offensively for them, and we'll see as that continues. As they'll be back at practice on Wednesday, and then we will be back. Excuse me, they'll be back Thursday, and we will be back after that to talk about what we saw. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.